My name is Glenn Tucker. I've been a mailman in Grayson County for 26 years, and I've delivered letters to a lot of strange places. But nothing comes close to what I found at 112 Wren Street. The house had been abandoned for over a decade. At least, that's what we all thought. Glenn was what you'd call an old-school mailman. Pressed uniform, sharp memory, and strict adherence to the USPS handbook. He didn't text on the job, didn't skip steps, and definitely didn't meddle in people's mail. He lived alone in a modest apartment above the bakery downtown, and he liked it that way. Grayson was small, one of those Midwestern towns where you know every face on Main Street, and gossip traveled faster than mail ever could. But there was one house even the gossips left alone, 112 Wren Street. The locals called it the Hollow House. Nobody had lived there since 2009, not since the Claytons vanished. The family of four had simply disappeared. No foul play confirmed. No signs of struggle. Just vanished. Plates still on the table. Lights still on. Every year or so, a new rumor would bubble up. Sightings of shadowy figures. Lights flickering in the attic. Distant crying late at night. But the cops never found anything. And eventually, the stories got dull. Until the spring of 2023. That's when the mail started arriving again. It was subtle at first. Just one envelope. Off-white, thick parchment. No return address. The recipient was Mr. Peter Clayton, 112 Wren Street, Grayson, Kentucky. Postmarked from Eaton, Ohio. Dated April 1st. Glenn paused. He knew the house was flagged in the USPS system as vacant. Do not deliver. But the envelope bore a curious seal. A symbol that looked like an eye inside a triangle, scorched faintly into the paper. He meant to return it. Really, he did. But something about the weight of the letter, the feeling of it in his palm, it lingered with him. That night, he placed it on his kitchen table instead of in the outgoing mail bin. By the next morning, 5 more letters had arrived, all for the same address, all with no return address. On April 5th, Glenn made a decision that haunted him to the day he was interviewed by the FBI. He stood at the rusted gate of 112 Wren Street, mailbags slung heavy with unanswered letters. The grass had grown wild. The windows still bore the grime of a decade's worth of neglect. But the mailbox, it had been cleaned. Not new, just wiped down, as if someone had been expecting him. He slid the letters in and turned to leave when the front door creaked open. Not wide, just enough for a sliver of darkness to be visible. He didn't go in that day, but something had changed. He filed an anonymous tip with the Grayson police. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of entry. But the mailbox was empty. Someone was taking the letters. The FBI didn't believe me at first. Not until they saw what was behind the wall. Not until the blood samples came back. Not until they found the last letter. 2 weeks passed. Glenn tried to ignore the pull, but the letters kept coming every 2 or 3 days. No return address. All for Peter Clayton. One morning, Glenn found something new inside the mailbox at 112 Wren Street. A small, rusted key taped to an envelope. The envelope was different this time. It was black, sealed in red wax. No name, no address. Just a single word handwritten on the back. Downstairs. He should have walked away, reported it, washed his hands of the whole thing. But he didn't. That night, Glenn returned, without the uniform, without the bag. Just a key in his pocket and a flashlight in his hand. The house creaked with every step. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of mildew soaked the walls. The living room was frozen in time. Toys still strewn across the floor. A teacup shattered in a corner. He found the door to the basement behind the pantry. It shouldn't have been there. He delivered to this house for years before it was declared abandoned. There was never a door behind the pantry, but now there was. The key fit perfectly. The stairs groaned under his weight. The air grew colder, more metallic. The basement was pitch dark, but Glenn's flashlight caught something. Brick walls lined with tattered newspaper clippings and rows of Polaroids. Faces, dozens of them. Children, adults, all faded, some with red X's marked across their eyes. In the far corner, something moved. He froze, listened. Nothing. Then, a soft scraping, like nails on concrete. He moved closer and saw what looked like a boarded-up crawlspace. Carved into the wood was the same I-triangle symbol from the letter. He pulled back one board, then another, and then a wall behind it crumbled. Not entirely, just enough to reveal a hidden chamber. Inside was a desk, a typewriter, and stacks of letters, identical to the ones Glenn had delivered. In the center was a single chair. A tape recorder rested on the desk. It clicked on by itself. They never left. Not really. The Claytons are still here. In every room. In every shadow. We just stopped looking. Glenn backed away, but something stepped into the room behind him. Not fast. Not violent. But present. He turned. The flashlight flickered. And for a split second, he saw a woman's silhouette. Long hair. Bare feet. Eyes that looked like they had been crying for years. Then the lights cut out. Glenn woke up on his kitchen floor. No flashlight. No key. No letters. Just a final envelope. Inside it was a photograph of him, sleeping. Stamped on the back was tomorrow's date and a handwritten note. You opened the door. Now you have to listen. He went to the police, then the FBI. They investigated, dug under the house, and they found the hidden room. But it was empty. No desk. No tapes. No photos. Only the Polaroid Glenn had received. And dried blood in the crawlspace. They told him to leave town. To keep quiet. He didn't either. He's still in Grayson. Still delivering mail. Because the letters haven't stopped. And now, they're not just for Peter Clayton. They're for Glenn. The next morning, Glenn didn't go to work. He called in sick. Something he hadn't done in 27 years. He sat in his kitchen. The unopened envelope sitting in front of him like a loaded gun. The handwriting on the back was different now. Slanted. Scratchy. Almost frantic. Read it where it began. He knew exactly where to go. Back to 112, Wren Street. The house looked unchanged. But something was different. A strange hum in the air. Like the sound a television makes on a dead channel. Glenn approached slowly. Inside, the living room was colder. Stale. The teacup on the floor was now perfectly intact. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single typewritten page. We hear you, Glenn. We always have. Come to the study. The answers are in the return letter. There had never been a study in the house, but something told him exactly where it was. Downstairs, past the crawlspace. He ducked under a sagging beam and followed a narrow tunnel lined with wires and broken toys. The hallway ended in a door that looked brand new. Dark walnut, polished brass handle. He opened it. Inside, a pristine study. Leather chairs, a grandfather clock, and a large oak desk. On the desk, a letter. It was addressed to him, but the return address. 112, Wren Street. Clayton family. Postmarked October 31st, 1989. He opened it. If you're reading this, it means the cycle has begun again. We didn't vanish. We were taken. Chosen. Glenn, you were the only one who ever noticed. That's why it had to be you. Find the ledger, before they do. A shadow passed across the doorway. He turned, and for a heartbeat, he saw them. The Clayton family. Frozen, as if in mid-motion. Pale, eyes vacant, then gone. He found it under the floorboards of the study, wrapped in a child's drawing. The ledger was old, leather-bound, smelling of burnt wood. Inside, dates, names, locations, and symbols. Dozens of them, including Glenn's name, next to a date. Today. Suddenly the house began to shake. The walls moaned. Lights pulsed. The study door slammed shut. Then the whispers started. Dozens of voices, overlapping, pleading, accusing. He dropped the ledger and ran. Up the stairs, through the pantry, into the daylight. That night, Glenn didn't sleep. Around 3:33 a.m., he heard scratching at his front door. He looked through the peephole. No one, but there was another envelope. Inside, a newspaper clipping from 1989. Headline: Mailman Glenn Walters last seen near Clayton home, presumed missing. His photo was beneath it. Same uniform, same smile, same glasses, but it was yellowed, old, like it had been printed 36 years ago. Glenn tore through his apartment, looked in the mirror. Everything was the same, wasn't it? His phone wouldn't dial out. His clock spun backwards. And outside, the mail truck he drove yesterday was now the older model, the one he used in 1989. He rushed outside. The street was empty. No cars, no birds, no time. Everything around him frozen. Then a voice behind him. "You deliver their mail, Glenn. Now you deliver for us." He turned. A man in a black suit, eyes completely white, holding out another envelope. Glenn didn't take it, but his hand did, as if it had a will of its own. Glenn walks the route again. Only now, the houses don't always appear on the map. Some of the letters aren't addressed to anyone alive. And sometimes, when he delivers them, the door opens on its own. He's seen others like him. Mail carriers with pale faces and blank expressions, delivering messages no one else can read. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't eat. But the bag is always full. And the next letter, it's for you. Glenn stood in his apartment, the envelope still gripped in his hand. It pulsed faintly, warm, as if it were alive. He hadn't slept in 2 days, or maybe 2 weeks. The postmark was smeared, but not beyond recognition. April 5th, 2025. Today. But the address it came from? Dead Letter Department. Zip code 00000. A place that didn't exist. Officially. Yet somehow, it was where all undeliverable mail went or was sent from. Glenn turned the envelope over. No name. Just a symbol. 3 interlocking rings. He had seen it before. In the ledger, there was one place he could go. Not on any map, but every carrier whispered about it at some point. Buried beneath the original Chicago post office was a forgotten floor, sublevel 5. It was sealed off after a fire in 1962, but some said it was still active. Not for sorting, for storing. He used an old carrier badge and a lie about elevator maintenance. The lift groaned down, past floors that hadn't been touched in decades. Then it stopped. Doors creaked open. Darkness, dust, and rows of pigeonholes. Thousands of envelopes, all unmarked. In the center of the room, a desk, and behind it her, a woman, thin, pale, dressed in the navy skirt and blouse of a 1950s postal clerk. She didn't blink. "You brought it back," she whispered. "They'll wake now." The woman slid open a rusted cabinet behind her. Inside, a file labeled Glenn Walters. It had everything: birth certificate, training results, performance evaluations, and a note, scheduled for induction, 2025. Courier of boundary routes. Return unfinished deliveries. Complete the cycle. Final test, 112 Wren Street. Glenn stepped back. "This is a job," he asked. "It's a duty," she replied. "And now it's yours." She handed him a parcel, wrapped in aged twine, wax-sealed. "Deliver this, before midnight, to the original sender." Glenn turned it over. The sender, Clayton family, 112 Wren Street. The recipient, returned to origin. The ride back to Wren Street was long, too long. The road stretched in ways they hadn't before. Street signs changed language. Even the sky took on a greenish hue. By the time he arrived, his watch had stopped. 11:56 p.m. He stepped out, package in hand. The front door was already open. Inside, the house glowed with a soft amber light, and the Claytons were waiting, still pale, still frozen, but their eyes followed him. He placed the parcel on the coffee table. It burst open. Inside, ashes, charred fragments of what looked like photographs, keys, and a small music box. The music box opened on its own and began to play. It was the same lullaby he heard from the Clayton home all those years ago. "Rockabye Baby." Each note made the house ripple. Like reality itself was loosening. The Claytons began to hum. Their mouths didn't move, but the sound swelled. Glenn backed away, but the shadows wouldn't let him leave. The walls curled inward. The music grew louder. The last thing Glenn saw before the light consumed everything was the face of Mr. Clayton, smiling, whispering, "Now the letter comes for you." Some say mail routes are simple, Point A to point B, but not Glenn's. Now he walks routes no one else remembers, in towns that flicker like bad dreams. He delivers letters to names that were erased long ago. And behind every door is a question. Will this be the last? Or the next? Last week, a new postmark showed up on his satchel. One he's never seen before. Zip code 00001. Return address redacted. And in his bag, a single envelope addressed to Clayton family, 112 Wren Street, postmarked tomorrow. Even silence has a sender. The next morning, Glenn woke up somewhere unfamiliar. The world outside his window was tinted in amber, and the sky hummed. He was in a house that looked like his own, but wasn't. The pictures on the walls shifted when he looked at them. One moment, they showed the Clayton family smiling in black and white portraits. The next, they were gone. Blank frames. His postal bag rested by the door. Inside, only one letter. Same wax seal. Same interlocking rings. But this time, the envelope was addressed to FBI Field Office, Quantico. Attention, Agent Mara Kessler. There was no stamp. Just a handwritten note. Delivered by proxy. Witness required. Agent Mara Kessler was already familiar with Glenn Walters. His name had come up 3 times in the past month, all under strange circumstances. Reports of deliveries made to buildings condemned decades ago. Signatures from people listed as deceased. One package was mailed from inside a sealed evidence locker. Now this envelope. It had appeared on her desk that morning, but no one saw it delivered. Inside, a flash drive. Coordinates. A photograph of the Claytons from 1993, dated one day before their disappearance, .d. And a note. He's not just delivering mail. He's delivering messages they don't want heard. Mara ran a trace on the zip code, 00001. It pinged one result, not a city. A vault beneath the National Postal Museum in D.C. Glenn arrived first. He wasn't sure how. The streets blurred past like static. One minute he was in the Midwest, the next, in front of a door marked simply, Authorized Carriers Only. He entered. Rows of post boxes lined the room, but instead of numbers, each had a name. Names that were crossed out, erased, but one slot was still glowing. Kessler, Mara. He slid the final envelope in. The vault shook. A wall slid open. Behind it, shelves, not of mail, of moments, frozen fragments of time, snapshots playing on loop. The Claytons in the backyard, Glenn as a boy, watching them from behind a bush, and someone else, a man in a postman's uniform, watching Glenn. The figure stepped forward from the memory. He was tall, with sunken eyes and a smile too wide. "You've done well," he said, "but you were never the first, just the latest." He extended a trembling hand and passed Glenn a worn ledger. Inside, names of every boundary route carrier for the past century. Each one had delivered to 112 Wren Street. Each one had vanished. You delivered the last letter. Now you take my place. Glenn backed away. "I never agreed to this." "Doesn't matter," the postman whispered. "The mail doesn't stop, and neither do we." Suddenly, Glenn's reflection in the glass warped. He was older, eyes sunken, wearing the same uniform. He was becoming him. Just then, Agent Kessler entered the vault. She aimed her flashlight forward and screamed. The old postman recoiled. Light seemed to burn him. Glenn reached for her. "Destroy the ledger," he shouted. She hesitated, then struck a match and dropped it onto the pages. Fire consumed the names, and with each burned name, whisper faded. The vault shook again violently. Time unraveled. Glenn grabbed Kessler's hand, and they ran, out of the vault, out into the night. They stopped miles away, breathless. Glenn's satchel lay limp, empty, for the first time in years. No letters, no assignments, no haunting destinations. "It's over," Kessler said, but Glenn wasn't so sure, because just then his phone buzzed. One notification. New delivery request. Destination. Unknown. Recipient. Clayton family. Delivery time. Midnight. Midnight came fast. The world seemed to hold its breath. Glenn stood at the edge of a quiet road outside what remained of 112 Wren Street. The house was gone, replaced by weeds, vines, and the skeleton of its foundation. But something still pulsed beneath the soil. Something unfinished. Agent Kessler was with him, flashlight in one hand, weapon holstered but ready. Glenn's phone buzzed again. Final delivery pending. He looked down at the envelope that had appeared in his bag without warning. Unlike the others, this one had no wax seal, no rings, just a blank front, no recipient, no sender. Maybe this letter was never meant to be written, he said. Or maybe it's the one that ends it all, Kessler replied. Glenn took a breath and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank, until the words began to appear, as if written by unseen hands. To those who have borne the burden of memory, the cycle ends here. The voices have been heard. The lost returned. Let no other carry this weight. The ground beneath them vibrated, not with danger, but relief. A quiet hum echoed through the trees. Glenn stepped back as the envelope dissolved in his hands. His bag, once a prison, fell to dust at his feet. In the distance, a faint light blinked to life on the horizon, and slowly, impossibly, figures began to emerge. A man and woman, 2 children, familiar outlines. The Claytons. Whole, safe, smiling. Time had held them captive in memory, but the final letter, unwritten until now, had freed them. Glenn took a shaky breath. They're home. And you're free, Kessler added. Weeks passed. The vault under the museum was sealed. The ledger now ash. No new deliveries. No haunted addresses. Glenn opened a small general store in town, stocked it with local honey and hand-carved trinkets. He never wore the uniform again, but he kept a single shelf behind the counter for letters that didn't belong anywhere, because some stories still search for a reader, and some messengers still walk quietly among us, just listening, and when the time comes, delivering one last message. If you enjoyed this mystery and want more chilling tales that blur the line between reality and the unknown, be sure to subscribe to Haven Tales. Like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a delivery.